Hello, I'm Sheila Applegate.
And I'm Zac Hansen.
And this is Live Sense8. In this podcast, we dive into the concepts of consciousness and other interesting trivia in the Netflix original series, Sense8. We're going to do an episode-by-episode exploration of how we can each live a Sense8 life. And we're also going to be throwing into the mix some special interviews as we go along. So, welcome, everyone, and
welcome to the show.
Yeah. All right, so what's going on, people? This is our new segment. We're calling it What's Going On, and I know you fans all get it. The Sense8 clusters know what I'm talking about. But we want to give updates about some of the fun stuff that the real-life community of Sense8s are doing. And I say real life like that because even all the actors and everyone on the show said there's such a blur between real life and the show, and even the characters are written in, so it just blurred right out into all of us, which is just amazing. So here, this is our little segment, which I'm just kind of setting up for you because it's the first time. We're just kind of giving you some of the things we know. Again, if you have information that you think the Sense8 world would want to know, hit us up at the same places on Twitter or through email. So, all right, so the first Sense8 Con happened in Rome, Italy recently. Is that so cool?
Really exciting. I got to watch some of the clips from that.
I know. It felt like I was there just watching. No, it didn't. I wanted to be there, but there was a part of me that felt like I was there. And they released the trailer for the special episode.
Oh, it's a special episode, right? Not the finale.
Right. But I haven't seen that yet. But they were lucky to get it. I've been looking for it. I don't know. It might be out here any day now, but at the Sense8, we know that Brian, who plays Will, was there. Max, who plays Wolfgang. Toby, the second Capheus. So from now on. And Naveen, who plays Jonas. We know they were all there. I think there may have been some others, but those are the ones I saw a lot.
Those are the ones that the paparazzi got shots of, right?
That made it to my Twitter feed, or our Twitter feed, but we're still building it up because we just started a few weeks ago. So we're going to be following a lot more people soon. So anyway, let's tell you, coming up, mark your calendars, because in March, I think the 3rd and 4th, or 2nd and 3rd, there's another con. So in Paris, in March, will be the second Sense8 Con. And it looked like a lot of the actors were going to that as well, so that's pretty exciting to see what's happening. 2
cons for a canceled show. Netflix, are you listening?
I know, right? Like, this is amazing. It's so cool. So this is what happened after. I saw a tweet about what Naveen said, who plays Jonas, and he said that he thinks we're going to be very satisfied with the finale. Now, he did say finale. So what do you think about that, Zac?
Well, that could be a lot of things. Some people want certain things to happen within the show. So maybe we're going to get all those loose ends tied up. For example, Sun maybe kills her brother. I saw a YouTube comment. Somebody wanted that to happen, and she would be satisfied if she got to see that happen. But I think there's potential that they might be able to announce, I don't know, a season 3 through 7.
That's what I was feeling. Honestly, when I saw that tweet, and some people got angry that he said it, thinking, how could we ever be satisfied? Because really, we may want this to conclude, but how are you going to conclude all of this? I mean, these guys are miracle workers, and we have.
Agreed.
But I don't know. I think it would be really hard. And I guess you could leave some things open and ended so they stay alive in our heads and our hearts. But my intuition, not that it's right, maybe it's my hope. I don't know. We'll find out as time goes on. But I think they're announcing something more after that. And then yesterday, I saw a tweet from Netflix. The actual Netflix tweeted. I say that with hesitation, and you'll know why in a second.
I went back to try to look for it today. I didn't find it. I didn't look hard though.
I saw yesterday. I saw a tweet, and it had a picture of Sun, and it was from Netflix, their account, and it said, "Sometimes endings are really beginnings," or something like that. And we had just talked about my thoughts about what Naveen meant. Mm-hmm. So I reposted it with tagging you, or adding you to it, and then seconds later it hadn't reposted and I couldn't find it anywhere.
Twitter censorship.
No, but usually if something goes away, then you see that it's gone, and that wasn't even there. So that, I don't know what dimension I saw that it gets, that hint that we're going to have more, but that's the dimension I'm choosing. If I get to choose a timeline, I'm picking that timeline. All right, so today we're exploring
episode 2
of season 1.
I Am Also We. Directed by Lana and Lily Wachowski. Written and created by Lana and Lily Wachowski and J. Michael Straczynski. And here's Nomi's future takes a dark turn while the rest of the Sense8's connections become stronger and more dangerous. And we grabbed that off of IMDb. That's the synopsis there.
Yeah, so they didn't really say much, but we can go a little more into it for everyone. I mean, again, before you go any further, remember, well, this show we're going to obviously talk about because, that's what you do when you're addressing an episode, you're exploring it. But remember, we do not promise that there will be no spoilers. And to put that more clearly, there will be spoilers along the way. But I was thinking about this because a friend of mine said she was just going to start watching the show for this podcast, and she was going to watch a few episodes. And I was thinking, okay, so she probably won't get it all in, ahead of us, or she'll be just a little bit ahead of us. And then I thought it could be really fun to watch it for the first time if you're just a little bit ahead, even if you do get spoilers. I think it would still be fun because you'd be thinking about, you'd have conversation about it as you go along. So, and we know what happens. Well, I'll tell you what happens to Zac every week, even going through it the second time. We watch the episode, and what do you say, Zac?
You tell me. What do I say?
I got nothing. I don't see anything in there. There's really not much in this episode. And then I just point out a couple things I'm thinking about just to start the conversation going. And then an hour or two later, it's like, oh, right, we have a lot to say about this.
It was a rich episode for sure. But for me, I always look at those. So last time we talked about DMT, and they just dropped this line like, yo, life, you're all connected. And it was a huge reveal. Like, those are the things I look for. And what we go and we observe in this episode, it really is rich and deep, but it's so subtle that it kind of makes me feel dumb a little bit because I don't really pick up on these things at first because I'm looking for the big concepts. And it's like, oh, yeah, there is a lot here. So it's really potent for sure.
Well, subtle is my favorite word, and that's probably why I get off on this show so much, because I'm always talking about the subtleties are the important. It's all in the subtleties, and I have so much fun finding them. But anyway, let's go kind of through each person and just give a tiny bit about what's going on with them, the main characters, the 8 in this episode. You want to start with Noni?
Yep. So the popular Noni is going to have a popular blog post, and they're going to go to Pride, and she's going to have that dark turn in the hospital.
Yeah. She sees Jonas and everything turns around. She falls off the motorcycle and she becomes Michael.
Oh no. Her mom's such a dick.
But she loves her. She loves her with the conditions or something like that. Talk about conditional love from a parent. She straight out says
to dominate you and condition you with my money. I mean, my love.
I'm sure that underneath the conditions there is some love there. I do believe that. It's just that a lot of people don't know how to love unconditionally.
Well, sure. She's her mom, and we just repeat
right.
what we know and what we're shown as little kids. So
hopefully we evolve.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, we're getting there, right, humanity?
All right, so then Will, he's actually in the hospital twice in this episode. He starts out in the hospital talking to the teen from the gang that he saved the life of last year. And they have a really interesting conversation that we're going to go further into. We got some stuff going on. Oh, and then he ends up in the hospital at the end because of the... with Jonas. That's in this episode, right? Or am I already doing spoilers?
Whoops.
Is that leading into episode 3 when... So at the end of this episode...
At the end, there's a car chase.
And that's it?
Yeah, there is a car chase.
Oh, okay. So all right. So forget that. Next episode. He starts again in the hospital. Told you there'd be spoilers. This is the whole journey. It's hard for me to compartmentalize it like this. Okay, so we got a lot of cool dialogue with his partner, Diego, about some of these things we're talking about, actually. We see the dynamics with his father, and then he's got some pretty cool interactions with Jonas and get some information about Noni that we want to dive into a little bit.
Lido, he meets his partner,
Fernando.
And is that Daniela?
Daniela.
Yeah.
Well, they have such amazing Spanish accents that I'll never be able to say their names the way, in the beauty that they are. But yeah, it's Daniela.
So Daniela kind of finds out about
New Yorker American. It's Daniela. And
kind of finds
Fernando.
about Lido's secret.
Yes, we do.
Celebrates with some champagne.
That's fun. Let's just jump into them a minute because we're not talking about them too much in our concepts later, I don't think. But one of my favorite lines in there, and it's one of those things forget it. I'm probably on episode 3 again. I have to stop watching this much. Okay.
Well, you're not up to 14 times yet, are you?
No, which is interesting, people. This is so cool, and a shout out. I don't know your name right now, but yesterday on Facebook, someone introduced herself to me, and she said she might be the oldest in the cluster. She is 74 years old in Portland, Oregon, retired, and she has watched the series 14 times. She loves it.
That is intense.
I know. I need to get back with her. If you're out there, write to me. Tell me what you're loving about it. What is hitting you so much? I mean, a lot of people are watching it tend to like.
It's a personal journey too.
It is a personal journey. Yeah. If you don't want to tell me, you don't have to. But I'd love to know what is sparking. But it's so cool to see the age range going on here.
Yeah.
Because I also saw someone say that their high schooler used it in a report in high school. So we got a big range here.
Big, wide audience.
Demographics is human. It's a human demographics.
Are you in touch with your humanity? You'll love Sense8.
Are you frustrated as heck with humanity? You'll love Sense8. Right? Okay, so Sun, we don't see too much of Sun this time. We see some...
there's just a little blip on the radar
at
the beginning, and she's holding that book. It's a red book.
Well, at one point, or
a booklet or a folder, a binder.
Will is opening a red folder that looks into the past with a girl that was taken away, and at the same time they flash. I think you're in episode 1. I'm helping you move up to episode 2.
Okay.
It could be that it was in the beginning of this episode that she was sitting with the folder, but it could be. The
when
folder
Amy's reading her
comes
blog.
back up when it shows a connection with her and Will. They're both opening the red folder at the same time. Will's is about the little girl that he saw as a child in his dreams, and hers, she's at the office, so we know it. Oh, we do know, because then the assistant comes in and we find out that if she doesn't act, then they're going to basically press charges.
Are you in episode 2?
I really think so,
Okay.
yes. You think I'm not? I think so. Anyway.
Kala?
She's got her engagement party going on, and
What a party. Oh man, Sheila really had to sell this scene to me. It was so rough. I enjoyed it. It's fun and entertaining, but I was like, is this real?
And I say, first of all, we're watching television. The whole point is we don't have to stick to the density of reality. But
Such a serious Sam sometimes.
he didn't think everybody should be able to know the dance. So I said, in my world, I choose to believe that it was a common dance that they all happened to kind of know. And I really watched it after you complained. I watched it some more to see how many actual moves there were in and how repetitive. It's a little more than most of the dances you see at a wedding, but where everyone knows, like the electric slide or
The chicken dance.
The chicken dance. It was a
Hokey
little more
pokey.
than that. But if you put culture in it, and it definitely could have. Plus, we've got all those mob dances going on.
Well, there was one thing that sold me, and it's like, well, if Kala loved that dance and she knew it and she did it at the club, then he could have rearranged it or arranged that everybody else practice the dance outside of it. That I can
There we go.
believe.
So that is the story now, so that Zac can enjoy
Accepts.
this incredible Bollywood. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, it was awesome for sure.
It's amazing.
They
I
worked
don't
really
know
hard
how-
on that scene too, from
Yeah,
what I hear.
yeah. I don't know how many takes, like 40 or something. I don't know. I know they were tired after that, but so that's pretty awesome. And then we've got some connection with her and Wolfgang. Basically, Wolfgang, I know we get to see his ass.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty awesome. But I don't know. And then we get to see him and Kala and their connection going on. And there is, I think, there's some more Riley and Will connections a little bit. But Sun and Wolfgang and Riley aren't really that. There's not too much movement with their story arcs in this time.
Wolfgang and Kala gets that experience. So Wolfgang's having sex, and she's at the party, and she's like,
Right, she's feeling hot. Yeah,
Yeah,
so we
hot,
see
so-
them more connect. We're seeing more connections and a little bit more of the pairing up going on in here. So not that they do ever really, really pair up, which I love because it's not supposed to be about, the prince and the princess meeting each other and living happily ever after, finding your one true soulmate. But anyway, yeah, so that's kind of what the episode is about. So we're going to dive into some of the concepts that we saw and some of the subtleties. And before we get started, I want to give a shout out to @VanessaIrisSoda on Twitter, who was the first person to reply to our or comment on our tweet asking what your favorite scene in this episode is. And she said, definitely Nomi's "I am a we" speech right before the Pride Parade. And then the comments kind of followed, and that seemed to be a pretty big consensus of opinion. And I
Yeah,
think
for sure.
that's a huge, huge part of this episode, especially setting the whole series and what this is about.
absolutely.
So let's dive into that.
All right, let's do it.
So she's basically in this, she's just written, well, she's upset, and she and Nita are talking, and she's kind of stirred up by the stuff that's happening, and Pride, because now it's Pride Week or Pride Day, and this is bringing back some emotions for her from her family, And so Neats tells her to write about it because she's a blog writer. And then we move over and we see her reading it out loud. Mm-hmm. And I loved this because Neats was in the background cooking, I think, or something. She's in the kitchen and you see her listening without looking and then looking up a little bit. But it's, to me, that's so natural. Like, I'm totally, you know, if you walk by and I got something I got to read out loud, or, you know, mm-hmm. my kids walk by and like, you may or may not be, I think she's really listening to her in this one because it's beautiful, but, yeah. You know, you just want to read it out loud. And it was such a perfect setup for her to be able to say this soliloquy, you know, or speech, like Vanessa said. So, anything you want to say about it?
Yeah, this is important. This is a big deal, this speech. And the way I saw it was done really well. Like, I know there might have been some people complaining on the internet that it was too abrupt and it was kind of force-feeding this idea of pride down our throats. But if you watch how it's done, the way they filmed it and the way they're talking, it's about every person's journey.
Yeah.
Right? And then they end with pride. Because ultimately, you know, that's their thing, and that's the pride's journey. Everybody who's part of that community, that's their journey, and it's different and it's separate. But before that, you know, there's a flashing of going to all the different characters and what they've had to overcome, whatever that may be, right? So whether you're gay or you're a woman or you're a black man or you're a white man, it doesn't matter. All the different stereotypes as we are conditioned to grow up in society from a young age, from our parents to our religion to our schooling systems, to all these different, you know, things that we have to overcome to learn to accept ourselves. Because from the get-go, we're trying to fit everybody else's mold. And so that's why it was really, I thought it was beautifully done. And I thought that they did show this is everybody's journey.
Yeah, I agree. Everybody in the cast and all of us,
mm-hmm.
you know, I think no matter who we are, we can relate to that. And it was very strategic. You know, when she talks about shame, they flashed to Will's father with his well, no, we figured out he was in a bathrobe.
Right. It was hard to tell. The first time I thought it was
with his gun still in his strap and
his ankle holster,
strap, and
in a bar
in
public,
right? And whose shame was it? You know, was it Will's shame? Like, it's not a judgment, but it just, they chose that. You know, was it Will's shame? Was it his father's shame? Shame of not being able to take care of himself the way, because we know at one point Will says, well, jumping back to when he's talking to the teen in the hospital, part of his dad died. A lot of his dad died when he got shot. You know, yeah. A lot of his identity died. So that was interesting too. But she said some really beautiful things. And I just said the shame, but one of the things, when I refer to that, I mean, she said she's talking about the religion. I mean, and I think, you know, it's religions or beliefs often that her parents pushed on her where she wasn't okay. Pride was a sin, but not hating or shame. And we find that we're finding it a lot right now, right, in society, where there's a group of people in different, I mean, I'm not going to hold it out to one religion. It comes in different ways, but where we put some sort of higher power belief of supremacy, and if you don't fit it, then that's sinful. But it's not sinful of me to judge you for it, or to hate you for it, or to shame you for it. You know, it's really sad. Like, even just talking about that, my heart hurts, and you feel that.
Very barbaric.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I did just kind of clip a little bit about what she said here that I'm going to read you so I get it word for word. She says, I'm marching for that part of me that was once too afraid to march, for all the people who can't march today, I march to remember that I am not just me, I am also a we. And of course, that's the episode name, so we know it's important, but we know it's important anyway, because that is what this is about. And it's about and that goes in a lot of different ways, because it's about community. Mm-hmm. She's a we because of the Pride community, but she's in the people that have that life experience. She's a we in her relationship. She's now a we with these 8 people around the world, and then the finding of a soul family when you aren't connected to your birth family, because sometimes you're just not. Sometimes the birth family aren't the ones who get you and never will be able to give you that unconditional love. But that doesn't mean you can't find it and be a part of something, be understood by people. And then there's the bigger, more metaphysical aspect of it, of oneness. Because we are a drop of full consciousness. We are the cells of the universal we as well. Science has already proven this, so it's not a, it's not a theory. We just are a part. We're connected to everything.
One field of energy manifesting itself in bazillions of infinite ways.
But for me, having taught conscious oneness for so many years, the precision with which they write this is, even just this one line, is so incredible, because a lot of times people think, well, they can't conceive of, if I'm one with everything, if we're one being, how am I also an individual? And so there's that fear of losing oneself into the we, into the oneness. So this is strategically saying, I'm not just a me. So it's not denying that I'm a me. I am a me. And I am also a we. And they put an A in there, a we, because we in itself is an identity. It's a being. So we isn't plural. It's a singular we. So, I mean, kudos.
Yeah, very awesome. Very awesome. Very layered.
And I want to say that, did you have more to say? I didn't know.
No, I was just spot on.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. And them.
Right, yeah.
So I want to say, too, so I think I think Lana has stated that there's a lot of her in all of the characters, but especially in Noni. And so I have a quote here that Lana said in one of her interviews that is almost, in a way, it says the same thing. And I just want to point out why this is so important, which I know you all know this, but it's just fun to dive in and geek out on it. But Lana says, I wanted to tell a story in which difference was not something that sets us apart from each other. It was actually fundamentally the thing that united us, because difference is the one thing that we all have in common. And to me, that's just something, I mean, I know it's probably something she said in variations in different times, but in that one interview, it was just coming through her, explaining it. But that's the core of her being, and the vibration of that in alignment with what gets said in that blog from Noni is just spot on. It's like, that's it.
And his life is so diverse.
Right.
It isn't black and white.
Or black and blue.
Right, or black and blue. It's not that at all. It's, we have 7 billion individuals on this planet, and we have, we're getting further along than 7 billion, but we all have our own perspective, and we can try to communicate those things, but we're all different in our own ways, and we all kind of have a piece of that puzzle that's going to help somebody else see a different perspective. So we're all just helping each other out, if we're open to it, to progressing towards a better experience for humanity on the planet, in my opinion. That's the pinnacle.
Well, I think sameness can be pretty boring. It doesn't really help us grow as a we. Or a me. So I do want to say one more thing about Noni. This is going to jump up to something we're going to talk about in a minute, but it comes out here. So we're going to bounce around a little bit. But one of the other things she says in here, which I want you to hold in your mind because we're going to come back to that concept in a little bit. But she says, the mistakes I regret were made in fear. Another powerful thing, right?
Yep.
I mean, we always have a choice in every moment to be in love or in fear. And when we make choices in fear,
It's not fun.
no, it really isn't. Some people live their whole life in fear.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people live there. And clearly her parents, or we know her mom, like we talked about that, like she seems like such a jerk, but I'm not saying she wasn't behaving like a jerk. But and she's saying I love you, but on my terms. But underlying that is her fear. Right. I mean, that is her baby. And she genuinely believes from what was put on her that her baby is going to hell for all of eternity because she's Noni instead of Michael. That's kind of scary shit. Like, you can understand when those beliefs get into someone why they behave that way.
Right, and those are the religious beliefs, and they don't really talk about the social structure either, because they're obviously a wealthy family, and you don't know how, some of those things you want to shuffle under the carpet or put in the closet because you don't want your peers as a high-level executive or whatever to know about these things. So I think it's a very layered situation. Absolutely. When it comes to how she's being treated by her mom.
I agree. So hold on to that because we're going to dive deeper into the whole fear idea in a little bit, but we're going to bounce over to, we just kind of referenced it. Zac said it's not black or white, and I said, and it's not black or blue, because we have another social concept that's being explored lately, at least in the States here, with the Black Lives Movement, which was then responded to with the Blue Lives Movement, and suddenly it becomes black and white, and we have to, there's this sense that you're supposed to pick sides of which one.
So we do, right? We draw lines in the sand.
All police officers are bad, all black people are bad, or all police officers are awesome and all black people are bad. So they really started diving into this in the first episode when Will makes the choice to take the child to the hospital, and the hospital says we won't help a gunshot victim. But then the nurse, who is black, comes up to Will and says to him, if this child lives and he ends up killing someone, how are you going to feel about that? Mm-hmm. And I think it's interesting the way they were able to... All right, let me make a disclaimer here. I am a white woman, so I am coming from this perspective, and you can tell me if you think I'm... Not you, Zac. You, right. The listeners, can tell me if you think I'm off in any way. But from my life experience... they did a good job of breaking down those layers and making us remember that there's all kinds of sides, and that this isn't an issue. Like, it is an issue. It becomes this issue, but we can't put people's lives into a social issue. It doesn't work that way. In each given situation, you have to make decisions, and they're always layered. And we're going to dive into like the journey that Will takes with this and how it impacts, because we have it rolling over from last episode where even his partner's like, no ambulance is going to come here. And that's because of history or whatever is happening. And he says, are you crazy? Like, you don't help this kid. But there's this kid. I mean, he is a kid. He's a human being, and he's a kid who clearly was formed by his environment, laying there saying, help me, with a gunshot, So Will helps him. And so when we hit this episode, they're in the hospital, and I love their banter and their dialogue. And I don't even know the kid's name, but he does come up in the episodes later, so I will get his name. But just little. I don't know. We won't know until we get to season 3, 4, 5, and 6 if he comes up anymore. But one of the beautiful things, this is one line that he does, kind of sticking now a little bit with the flow of the episode, but we open with Will in the hospital and they're still dialoguing. And in that scene, that's when he asks, they both had their fathers were shot, one on the side of the gang. I don't know if he was shot by a police officer or not.
I don't think they said.
They don't say who shot his dad, the child's dad, but Will's dad was shot on duty, and it's alluded to. It had something like, similar dynamics to it. I don't know if they straight out say it, but that was the presentation I got. And then they chat about it, and the kid asks Will if his father died, and he says something like, parts of him died, which we talk about. So that also shows up in the scenes later, like when he lost his identity as a police officer. When his dad had that happen, his pride, his beingness went away, and he ends up just drinking in the bars.
For sure. I have met one police officer in my life, and I'm actually going to reference him later in the show. But, as a police officer, you're kind of on all the time. Like, there's no turning it off. It's not like you clock out at 9 o'clock and you go home and then you're not a cop anymore. So I think it's really hard for them to transition between work and personal life. And what that will cause is a huge, and this is my perspective, right? Just a huge identity is built into being a police officer. So when you take away your purpose, right, that was his purpose. And when you take that away and you break down that identity and you're just kind of in shambles, like, that's really hard to go through as a person. And that's just one scenario as a police officer. I mean, this can be anything.
Right. And I think that there is there's a code among police officers, just like there's a code among gang members. Mm-hmm. And I don't think they're all that different at their core. I'm not saying they play out the same way or they think that they're the same, but I think at the core, some of those
principles
similar. Probably look the same if we were to dissect them.
Good old boys club.
Right.
That's what I like to call that.
So, but it's interesting. So this kid then in that scene, at that end of that scene, as they're separating, he says to Will, I don't owe you for what you did, but you should know I will never forget it. And that is so huge to me. I mean, it does come up in the plot later a little bit, but that piece, as we're talking about codes, mm-hmm. the code of, for my career, it was code of ethics, but, I think I was ethical in the, we all have a code, right? Even as a social work, we had a code we were supposed to live by. And, so when you think about that, a lot of times on the street, it's a I did this for you, now you do this for me.
Or in a relationship.
In relationships too, right? I mean, it's around all of society. But for this kid, it seems kind of like he's on defense, like, I don't know you. But it's actually, to me, I took it a lot deeper, because a lot of times when someone helps you in those situations, and in some groups where everybody's in survival mode, I help you, now you owe me, and I get to call it in whenever and it's a power play that goes with a territory, and he's saying this doesn't fit in there. We're not applying those rules to this,
mm-hmm.
but I will never forget this. And to never forget that a police officer showed him love, even I mean, he was conscious when the partner said, don't do it. The ambulance won't come, when the hospital went to reject him. So he was there, and we don't see anyone else there, right? Will was there when he wakes up. So it hit to his core. And I think that that's the piece, right? How do we change this? We do good deeds. Like, I'm not saying that Will had to do what he did, but showing love, showing respect, showing the honoring of a humanness that you see them and you understand them is the way to shift those things.
I thought that was,
This kid's maybe 13 to 16.
Yeah,
16 is probably the high end.
Mm-hmm.
And he's also, he's pretty stern with Will. So you got to know that him as a character, he's had to grow up and become a man as he would in the hood, right? Whatever that means. And he's looks in the eyes and says, we're not going to do this, right? So he's also presenting himself as a confident man as well. So it was very interesting too. And there's a code between men in respect that I connected with in that scene as well.
Yeah, that's true. And then we move to the next code when we jump over to the scene where Will then goes into the bar where his dad is. This isn't the flash where his dad's passed out. His dad's at the bar with his fellow police officer friends. And he walks in and none of them are happy with him. They're all giving him...
Nope, they're not happy with him at all.
They
got to shun him because he did the wrong thing.
Right. He broke their code. He chose the wrong side. So we start to see that even someone like me on the outside feeling like I'm being forced to choose a side is less maybe than people involved in it. And his dad gives him shit. Like, his dad literally gives him his shit. Like, I thought that was really funny. He just, takes his bag out and throws it on the table and says, empty this for me. And it's just such a fun symbol of giving him shit because he does. His dad is kind of mocking him. He's going along with the police officers. He makes Will buy them all a beer. And then one guy who happens to be the only black guy there says, I'm not going to take Trader's beer. And then there's a joke about, well, the beer's neutral, you can't drink mine. But that little tiny line again, because it's like, he felt like he had to choose sides. He literally represents both of the population. We don't know where he grew up as far as socioeconomics go, but he clearly, and maybe you could say that if it was a white gang member, they would have done the same thing, and they could have. But I think the dialogue going on in our society right now that's being reflected here just shows that, and I've also seen people leave their communities for whatever reason, and depending on what the community is. Like even Noni, she left the community, so she's a traitor. Sometimes even when people better themselves and get out, I've seen that a lot with the people near me where, there's a community that isn't as healthy. And when someone's working their way out, they get treated sort of like a traitor. So it's a very, another one of those subtle lines that is just loaded with possibilities of thoughts and conversations.
Right, which takes us back to the Nomi's blog even, right?
Right.
Like we grew up in a certain way, and now we are becoming a better version of ourselves, more conscious or whatever may have you, and we don't want these habits and we don't want these things because maybe that's ultimately going to make our lives shorter, and it's not loving to ourselves to be this way anymore, and we want to step out, and it's not very wide received because those people have to then look at themselves as a reflection, and all the triggers just trigger up and everybody's feeling uncomfortable, so you just gotta make sure that doesn't happen.
Right, because if somebody else changes,
the shunning and the shaming,
but if somebody around me changes, and I really can't say, that's not my responsibility. Like I have to take responsibility if somebody else gets out of a situation that I'm saying is overpowering me. Then I have to realize there's also a choice within me with that. So yeah, that was interesting. But then when we hone in on Will and his dad, it changes. So there's the perception on the outside, what I got to do with the guys, and then there's father-son, and it shifts. I mean, he throws him his shit, literally, in a bag, but then he takes it back. He literally takes the shit back that he gave his son. And then he starts talking to him, and he genuinely says, you were the one in the situation. You had to do what was right for you, and I respect you for that. So even though he's playing this game, he's got that genuine moment of, I get it. We are all individuals in these situations and making decisions that we have to make that we can live with. But he again does point out, what happens next, you're going to have to. He says that.
Sure, yeah.
Whatever happens next, you got to deal with it. You made the decision that was right for you at that time. If something happens, good or bad, you're the one responsible to deal with it.
I think that's awesome, and this says a lot about Will's father.
Right.
Because it's a father telling his son that he's proud of him.
Right.
So to me, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Personally,
yeah, especially when he has
to
break from his group to say it, you know.
Also, as a good parent, not that I am one, but you also want to teach independence, and you want to allow your children to live their lives and make the mistakes that they're going to make, because that's their journey, right? So he does remind him, but he's also allowing him to do that and grow as a person.
Right, and then we go into where he puts his fears on him in a second, but as you were talking, I was thinking, we're also seeing there the group mentality. So why saying Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, and grouping people instead of looking at individual? I mean, all lives matter. Like, really. I mean, I understand the movement of Black Lives Matter, and we need to honor that because it hasn't been honored. And when people brought up all lives matter, it was often just to counter that. But beyond that, it's still true. They do matter. Life matters. But, and you matter for being a human being, not for your circumstances. But we see Will's father as an individual. So when he walks into the bar and they're all together, we see them as a collective, and the impression that they give us isn't that loving, right? But then when we separate the individual and we see, even in there, we see them as individuals, we start to see their beauty. And that's the importance of, no matter what group of people we're looking at, we have to look at individuals. Yeah,
absolutely. And us versus them doesn't really work out that well for the whole. And humanity just tries to repeat that. It's very, to me, those are puppet strings. They're divisive. Just look at America and the election recently. Like, that was crazy dynamics going on. And we're seeing a lot of this social upheaval and things like this a lot. So we have Will here in the middle of it, choosing not to play that role and doing what he needs to do. So that says a lot about Will too.
Yeah. And then this kind of gets into parent dynamics too, that we're weaving into the whole thing. But then it moves on when Will starts bringing up the little girl. And whatever that case was, which we're not going to find out. I won't spoil this stuff for you, but we won't find out much more about that until later. But he basically tells him, like, he's honoring him, make your own decisions, you got to live with it. But then when Will mentions the girl again in that case, he's like, don't say anything. You get heard saying something about that, and they will put you in a psych test and have you out of here so quick you don't know what's going on or whatever. So basically we see that protective parent. Like, I can see you as an individual, but don't let the world, like, I don't want you to go down that road. That scares me because of what other people will do for you, which I think his mom probably had some of that going on too, if we can see her loving underneath.
It's somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Somewhere.
So,
Yeah, I mean, it's a big deal. That's how organizations and stuff, if he brought that up, and it's like a whistleblower when they come out with something somebody doesn't want you to see, it's not good, right? But usually the public is like, yeah, and then the establishment's like, boo. So it's just another us versus them situation. But
it also gets into trust. Like, who can we speak to and who can we trust, which is our next topic. So, yeah.
Well, a lot of this episode, so Nomi, she was talking earlier about how basically the worst decisions she's made in her life are out of fear.
Right.
And that causes regret. So we're talking about trust, and we have all these characters that are kind of losing their mind, and they don't know what's going on yet, right? So they're opening up to sensations that they have no idea. They're feeling like shit because they've had a migraine for like 3 or 4 days. And so they're having a tough time, and their reality is shifting. So that's another layer of the trust factor in their shoes, in their situation. Right. As we're reminded, this was filmed where each scene we're only given what the character knows at the time as well. Exactly.
Right. So we're experiencing it with them as they take the journey, which is uncomfortably cool. But even just following the concept with Will, and who do you trust? Like, he can talk to his dad, who is a member of the cop community, but he can't talk to him as a cop in the group, but he can talk to him over here about it. His dad isn't even saying you're crazy for that. He's saying,
don't do it.
If you do that, they will say you are crazy. They will. So his dad probably knows that something real was going down there. And then Will also talks to his partner, which is pretty awesome. His partner at work, Diego, right? Is that his name?
Yeah, Diego.
They get some. I know you love the way they dialogue.
Like their dialogue.
They really throw in a lot of these concepts, and but Diego can relate to some degree, but we know he's not stopping Will. But going on, could it be harder for him? Because he's open to it, but he has. Well, okay, so he experienced the one thing.
He's open but limited. He can only go so far.
Exactly.
With it, right?
He's not against it. He doesn't think it's crazy. He doesn't have a depth of understanding about
and he just can't relate to these experiences. But he doesn't show well for
so he has the one thing where he's walking a dog, right?
So the scene is there. Will and Diego are. It's like the morning briefing at the police station, and they're walking in to get briefed for the day. And they're sitting down at their table, and Diego says something along the lines like, "Oh, I've had some psychic experiences myself." And Will says, "Nocturnal emissions don't count." And I believe that's the scene you're talking about.
Yes, and that was the term, Zac.
It was.
I said to Zac, what? He goes, "It must be dreams." Yeah, a dream. And I'm like, "I think it means more than a dream, Zac. I think it means a wet dream."
And she was correct. So
it's a really funny line. Right. That was
especially to say to your partner. So they're teasing each other about Will gets it's good that their partnership is amazing. So
they have an amazing partnership. Yeah. Which is another cool thing in the theme as a whole. Like, these characters, for the most part, Sun is left out there alone, but she does have her teacher from the martial arts that she can trust. But right from the start, these characters mostly have some really great support outside of the cluster that trust them and let them be them while still grounding them maybe a little bit into their lives, which is pretty awesome.
It is awesome.
But even with that, you can only say so much to some people, right? And then Nomi. Do you have other stuff about the friendships and trust? I mean, we want to talk about Nomi and trust too.
Yeah, so the idea though is these Sense8s can only go so far with who they trust. And it's that way because we have so many barriers that we have to go through in life as a human being to play different roles for other people instead of being authentic to ourselves. Right. So that's the theme of the entire show.
Right. And I think with that, I'm looking at, because we want to look at ourselves.
As in episode 2.
Yeah. The entire show, episode 2 of season 1. But I think turning it back on us, like, how do we do that? Because I've kind of lived a life that most people think is crazy. I came from social work, clinical therapy, degree, clinical, where there were hallucinations and there were diagnoses and there were drugs to suppress it. Back then, I early on came to the conclusion, I was opening to this, well, I've been like this kind of my whole life, but I was opening to learning how to use this even in my earlier career. And
you'd have a master's, right, in social work?
I have a master's in social work, and it was probably my last mainstream job before I shifted over to do full-time spiritual energy work. I was actually working with the Oneida Indian Nation. So it's a culture that's more open to different things, which was a good bridge for me. But I really came to the conclusion there with some of the people that psychosis or hallucinations, as we would diagnose it, and the visions that so here I have all these visions, and I'm communicating with the non-physical, and I'm doing all this, and then you've got patients in the clinic who are getting drugs for their hallucinations, which aren't that off from mine, except that they're in fear, and I'm in love. So my core in interpretation and openness is in love, and theirs was in fear. And that's a huge difference, how we perceive it and how we present it. And then also, how do you say things? Do I, now I'm out publicly for a while, so pretty much, it's me. If you're going to come get me, come get me. But I always tell people, well, if I'm crazy, there's a lot of really cool people in my life who are also crazy, and I've made a whole career out of it, so feeling good about that. But so we've got Noni here, and they're all opening to these visions, right? And Noni gets in the hospital situation with her parents, her mom, and her sister's trying to be a bridge. But her mom is clearly triggering all of her fears, and she becomes isolated from the people that are balancing her. Neitz is kicked out of the hospital, and Dr. Metzger, which
you got some little tidbit there, which is awesome that you found. Go ahead. What is Metzger?
Metzger means butcher.
In?
German.
So pretty interesting.
So now they're putting fear in. So now this doctor, because we put power in doctors and butchers, we put power in doctors, titles, pictures, right? You don't know if those are her. Someone shows you an x-ray. How do you know that's your x-ray? But they put this up there. They've got the mom in fear already, and they tell her that she has
unification of the frontal lobes in the brain, where they kind of meld together. I don't remember
the A is the word that made it. So anyway, this is the AFLS. It's AFLS. So it's like unidentified. It's an A word for unidentified. Frontal lobe syndrome. And they give this title, and it's not a real disease in our world.
Could be in the show.
We don't know if it is in the show yet. I'm saying it probably isn't. I looked it up because one of my parents has Alzheimer's and one has frontal lobe dementia. So I mean, I was very curious about it, but you picked up on that. And so we searched it. It's not a disease. So we don't know if it was a fake disease to begin with, so they could go and butcher her head, which we've seen in the flashbacks of Will's memory. The little girl had the procedure done. But everything, she's locked in, she's being given drugs now, and we know that, drugs can change your senses, sure. And now she doesn't have trust. She doesn't have the people who she can trust. She can't, and they tell her she can't trust herself. And that's the key, because that happens to a lot of people in a lot of different ways. But if you can't trust yourself,
then who can you trust?
Exactly. Then all reality goes away. If you haven't come to a conclusion that there's a baseline of your reality, a core to your reality that you're going to hold,
According to you and your experience.
Right. When I was young, with my heightened intuition, the hardest thing for me was when my parents lied to me. And they may have done it for good reason. You think a kid doesn't understand something, so you tell them. Or even as simple as, if I could feel my mom's energy really upset, and I said, what's going on or what's wrong? And she said, everything's fine. Blew me out of my whole system went into whack mode. Because if I can't trust my intuition, I can't trust anything. So with my kids, I would always say, I'm upset right now. It's nothing that you need to know about. It will be okay. Everything will be okay. I just have to experience this right now. Because there's those subtleties that tell us we can't trust our intuition. Just in the politeness, you talk to, hey, how you doing, Zac? Oh, I'm great. And then we're supposed to be like, oh, okay. Even though you might be radiating out that you're, ready to go jump off a cliff. And we're like, oh, polite. Okay. Thank you very much. So, that happens. He totally strips her of her trust in herself. And
she already doesn't know what's going on with herself.
Right. She was already trying to figure that. I mean, this awakening is disruptive. And how many people have spiritual awakenings and then freak out and say...
And don't know what it is, or there's no context around you for any of this.
Right.
It's rough.
Which is also partly why we did the show.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's super hard. She does have a dark turn in that little room locked in a tower.
And then Jonas appears. But you can't trust if Jonas is real.
Because the door's locked.
Because the door is locked, but he appeared.
Right.
But he says to her to try. I didn't grab his exact quote for her. I did grab it when we get to Will, but he basically said, you know what's real and what isn't. He comes in and gives her back her power, or at least attempts to. He says, you're the one that knows. You know inside of you what feels right and what doesn't feel right, which is the most important thing we can give to anyone. Mm-hmm. So he does do that for her, but she still kind of flips out a little bit. She still doesn't know.
Yeah, she doesn't know.
She doesn't know. And she can't.
And then you hear a knock on the door, and she doesn't know if she's going to knock on the door.
Which she didn't, really, because the knock was in one of the other Sense8's lives.
Was it, though?
Yeah.
Because Nita tells her on the phone that she went to every door.
Oh, okay. So maybe it was...
But it could have been both.
Well, they flashed... Yeah, it could have been both. So, does she say that later that she knocked? So, to the door. She's got a knock on the door. Here, she's been looking for Anita, and Neats is there, and she doesn't find her.
Right. She doesn't answer the door because she just saw who knows what in her room, and then he's just gone right before her eyes, and then there's a knock. She's going crazy, right? Right,
and then even when Neats calls the phone, she almost doesn't answer it. So you can see how someone who's told not to trust themselves, who doesn't trust themselves, who's getting that vision, can close themselves further out of reality, because if she hadn't answered that phone and heard her on the other end, she wouldn't have had that hope to get out.
I'm starting to recall what Jonas said to her, and basically what he said is, as soon as you woke up in this hospital room, you knew that you were in trouble.
Okay.
And so I'm going to segue there a little bit. Back in 2010, I was at a martial arts seminar, and one of the presentations that was given was kind of a lecture, and it was by the police officer that I mentioned. And he was talking about a study that was done, and it's documented and written about. But basically what they did is they took people who were part of a violent crime or incident, and they put them, and they lived, and they put them into a hypnotic state, and they got into their subconscious mind, and they asked them questions about the day. And all of them had the intuition that something was not right, but none of them did anything about it. So this is why it's so important to trust ourselves and to not override or not think about or even check or second, we need to be able to trust ourselves to follow those little hunches, those little pieces of intuition or like, oh shit moments, like I should do something. And when we do follow them, they usually pan out. And if it's nothing, at least you checked, right? But that was something that's stuck with me is when, especially when I teach martial arts, it's about teaching awareness first, because self-awareness and situational awareness, those are gonna not get you in confrontation in the first place. So if you're following those, but anyway, I think that's really important to know, and that all of these characters are second guessing themselves because they have no context for what it means to have visions or anything like that. And they have the society telling them, you got to be the certain way. So it's very, very interesting. So trust your gut.
Yes. The takeaway from today's episode, trust yourself.
Yeah. Check on those things.
Your senses. Well, and then, so now let's skip to Jonas and Will, and the trusting again, because Jonas is giving us really great information and getting them through. He really is helping them get through this situation right now. I know you think, we don't know who he is, what he's done. I think that
I just say, me personally, I still think he's a questionable character.
I think that they create non-judgmental layered characters who have all sides. And I think he has a lot of sides, just like the cops had sides, the gang member has sides. I think that we're going to see some of that. But in this situation, he is giving these people exactly what they need to get in their power. So if he was really trying to hurt them, he could just leave them and they'd implode themselves probably. But he's someone coming in and giving them some of the guidance and wisdom that they need right now to make some sense of it. So he shows up in the store. Will is getting the sleeping pills, and I love the store clerk. He's just funny. I don't even know what he made no sense. He went to some conference and everybody's
the training.
I know it seemed like it must be training for working, but he works in this little. It's not even a drugstore. It's just this little mart. How much training did he get? Right. But whatever. It was a great line. He's like, "The pills are like drugs are like shoes. Everybody needs them, but they don't always fit right." You know? Anyway, he was adorable little. Whoever I'll have to look up your name and give you a shout out sometime because you nailed that little role there. Claim it. So anyway, Will's in there, and then he goes to look at the Psychic magazine.
Sedona's up there, I think, and then Psychic magazine. Yeah, there's some little touches of.
It did remind me. Zac and I were out. One of the magazines put an article about me in it, so we had gone to Barnes and Noble to look because I didn't even know the article. I don't really read those magazines, and I didn't know. But we knew the name, so we went looking to see if it was at Barnes and Noble, and we ended up going down that rabbit hole and finding some interesting magazines, and we brought them home that night, and we really had fun.
Yeah, it was a fun journey.
Some of it we were cracking up. We're not limiting anything, but the presentation of some of the stuff really, we had a lot of fun. It was
hysterical.
And then we had an imagination of the spirit world looking down at us, laughing at the magazine, and then we just went on that rabbit hole forever. Okay, so Will looks at the magazine, And then Jonas shows up, and big plot point is we forgot that the police force was told that Jonas is like there's a
guy in a suit that tells a bunch of cops that they're looking for this bad guy.
And it's a federal task force no, it's something, it's one of those bizarre, like, we just created a task force on the federal level to come in and take care of these.
Created some alphabetical agency.
Right. So Will is supposed to be looking for Jonas. So he knows him, but he responded when he saw the picture. He had memory of him in some way. So he sees Jonas. He knows that he's the guy he's supposed to take in as a cop. And he turns to Jonas and he says something to him about that. And again, this I got down. Jonas says, you know what they told you, and you know what your senses are telling. The question is, which of these are you going to trust? Brilliant line. Mm-hmm. Another brilliant line, right? So
that's really his message to the characters.
It really is.
Who are you going to trust, yourself or what everybody else is telling you?
Right. And what was your experience? And reminding him, like, these answers. You don't need it from me. He's not coming in and telling him, oh, I'm not a good guy. I'm a good guy, or you need me, or giving him any background that could help him. He just says,
he's a guru.
He is a guru. That's why I love him. That's why I feel like I'm protecting you, Jonas. So if we follow just that theme there, in the end of the conversation, Will's listened to that line, and then even we're going to talk about some of the other things he says, because that kind of goes off into a different offshoot. But he has this conversation with him, and we know that Will knows in his senses who Jonas is. And then Jonas gives him more guru information that he needs exactly. I mean, nobody else has shown up and understood him the way Jonas does in this moment. And then Will says, but I'm still a cop. I'm going to have to arrest you. And then Jonas, and this is where brilliance of going back to the original scene with his dad, when we're trying to figure out why the scene about the gun in the holster, in the ankle holster, is Jonas says to him, in the time that you can reach down to grab your gun in the ankle holster, I will already have whatever you know. Mm-hmm. And then that's when we see, on your side of it, he's probably done he knows his martial art. Like, this guy knows how to fight. Yeah. Not that you have to have gone on the dark side, but he did something in his life that wasn't all guru love, because he kicked ass.
Right.
And
pushes Will down and gives him a little spanking.
Right. And then the clerk's like, not cool, dude. Right. Should I call the cop? And Will's like, I am a cop. And they go running out. Now, okay. And then they're in that whole chase scene. Another brilliant.
Cool, yeah.
Yeah, another brilliant thing. And it's in that scene that we can get into talking about teleporting and how that all happens. But Jonas, and I thought I had gotten these quotes for you guys, but I didn't. So I'm sure some of you know them, or maybe we can put it up on our Patreon. But he basically says to him, I have the answers. So they're in this car chase, but in the car chase, Jonas pops into Will's car, then Will pops into Jonas's car, and they're having this conversation as they're driving. And Jonas basically tells him, I have the answers you're looking for. If you do away with me now, you'll never find them, But also, Will at one point says,
Am I losing my mind?
Am I losing my mind? Another brilliant line. I mean, how can we catch all these lines? And Jonas says, no, it's just expanding. Yeah. He says, no, it's just expanding. Which I know that feeling. I mean, there's times when I felt my mind expand and stretch, and when I'm teaching, I talk about expanding our consciousness. But it sure can feel like that's a brilliant line. Another brilliant line.
It is.
But going back to the store, just because I pushed this off because we want to talk about the sensations that they're all getting. This is key to that. But when they're dialoguing and he talks about angelic, or he said, I saw you with a woman who killed herself or something like that. And I think they did see him there. And that's how they come up to it. And he says something about her death. And then Jonas says, we all experience many deaths and many births within our lives, but not many know what it means to be reborn as Sense8. So now they're getting the information. He's getting the information of what happened to him. And he says, you have a migraine. And that's like clear evidence. Will knows, like, okay, they're all getting migraines. And Will's like, okay, he knows this about me. But then he says, you will start to feel strange things. You will feel snow in the middle of the summer when there isn't a cloud in the sky, or rain when there isn't a cloud in the sky. You'll feel anger and joy and pain and pleasure without any reason.
And that's when he was standing in front of him at the magazine rack.
Right,
in the convenience
it's back
store.
in there before the chase. I bounced on us. But that, I just wanted that piece out because think about this, like everybody, all of you listening. How many times, and there's times in the episode we can talk about with cravings and we see it happening to them, but how many times have you had a feeling that you didn't know why? Like suddenly you get sad and you don't know why you're sad. And you assume that it's, you search in your brain and you find a story and you decide to attach to it. But sometimes it's just sadness. And sometimes it's not even yours. And the more, or joy, you know, and the more you become connected to that and realize that it's more sentient than we give notice to, we're not little, we're also a we.
Right.
And so that experience, it's reminding me, when my son was really little, maybe like 3, we were in the Iraq War, and I was telling, so a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, it was probably in my car with me, my daughter and my son, and I was talking about the war in Iraq, and my son said, oh, that's not good. And then he said, I have friends there. And my daughter, who was 5 at the time, she's like, you can't have friends there. Mommy, tell him that he can't have friends there. Because she knew a little bit about geography,
Mm-hmm.
And he says, I do have friends there. I had them when I was with God, and that's where they were going. Or I had them when I was in, I don't know what language he used, and that's where they were going. And it blows my mind to think about this now and who he knew that's in Iraq. And as they grew up, were there times when he was feeling, because even young, sometimes he just had these random explosions. I mean, he's so low-key. Like, it's hard, I'm sure, for you to even think of it now. But he'd have just these outbursts that came out of nowhere. Like, was that something with someone somewhere else, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then we experience those feelings more and more. I'm sure you felt it with people that you're close to, but...
Yeah, I think the big thing is if you have these experiences and you don't know where they come from, like a lot of times, if you're not exposed to any type of training or you don't have somebody in your life that can tell you these things, you're like, oh, this is my problem, I got to deal with it, or whatever it may be. But really, you're just kind of tapping into the universal energy of we, if you will, and that collective consciousness, and pulling out some information that isn't yours per se, that wasn't your thoughts or feelings or whatever, and it just kind of, you're processing it for somebody else, or getting a premonition of something somewhere in timelines.
Well, I think we got to be careful. I mean,
blurry.
you can be getting a premonition, but I think a lot of times people will bounce to that. Like, so they get a bad feeling and then they think something bad, you know, in the fear. Sometimes we think a bad premonition and...
Right, there are techniques to understanding.
Right. But for me, a lot, I notice I'll get some of the stuff going on with my clients. So in the morning before a client arrives, or like in the time before the client connects with me, I start to have these weird thoughts, weird feelings, and I, more and more I know, oh, maybe I don't attach to things so much anymore. I just kind of wait to see. And then they show up and they describe exactly what I had felt for a while, So you learn not to hold on to them or make them a big deal or realize you have to fix yourself.
And for me, sometimes it's food cravings. I'm like, I'm craving this food and it is not my type of food. Why do I have this craving? So that's very interesting too, because I'll come down and into the house. I'll be like, all right, are we having this for dinner? Because whatever, I think we are. And somebody's like, oh yeah, or, you were craving Doritos not too long ago, and you were just like, what is going on with this? And we turned out it was you're on a TV show interview, and it was the gentleman was craving Doritos that was interviewing you, right?
And I didn't even know him.
Right.
And I actually traveled to the interview, so he wasn't local. And leading up to it, it would just taste Doritos.
Right, what?
And then it wasn't even, it would be I would taste Doritos and be like, ooh, I like the taste of Doritos. But I didn't take it to, and I think, oh, maybe I want Doritos, but then it would go away, and the thought would go away. And then I mentioned it to him, and he's like, oh, I've been eating Doritos or craving Doritos all week. And I'm like, okay,
Right.
Yeah. And then when the person, my closest person, soul, from what I would say is my cluster, when he was alive, he had a drinking issue. And I always knew, even if he wasn't here, I knew when he was going to go, because he would not drink and then he would binge, and then he would go without drinking. And I knew he was going to go on a binge because I would start craving beer. I would wake up in the morning and look at my refrigerator and think, I want a beer. That's just not me. I'm not a huge drinker. I don't think, maybe in college I drank in the morning. I don't even think I did then, it's just not in my head. And it would just, at first I thought I was going crazy when that stuff first started happening, because what's wrong with me? Do I have an addiction? It would be on my mind all day. I just want a beer. I just want a beer. And then I started to see the pattern, and I'd be like, yeah, I know what's going to happen next, And we see that in the show, because you talked about how Kala felt hot when Wolfgang was having sex, but then right after he suddenly got a craving for Indian food, and she said that her dad's this incredible cook, and they just had this big banquet of Indian food,
right?
And he needs Indian food.
I believe he did say it was an unusual craving.
Yeah. And then he goes to the restaurant, and then we get the teleportation. They've been all bouncing. But I want to talk about that scene for a quick second, because I noticed they were each perceiving, in that scene, they were each perceiving the other person where they were. And I think that's kind of different than where some of the other scenes are. So Kala is on the balcony, and she sees Wolfgang down below her. In the same setting as where she is, but he's in the Indian restaurant and he's seeing her walk through the crowd. And there's an interesting twist to that, because the people, they were staying present in where they were, but they were seeing the person come to them, versus when, oh, now I'm in this broken down church with this lady that's gonna, and so there's the popping, right. So there's that perception. And I think it kind of can go both ways. Sometimes we see it when, sometimes we perceive people coming to us, but they may perceive that we went to them. And then other times we may actually go to the spot and perceive our surroundings. For me, when I was younger, speaking of alcoholism again, but one of my best friends, when I was younger, his mother was an alcoholic, so we used to talk on the phone every night, but he didn't ever let me in his house, ever. And then years later, I was asked to come to his house by someone else in the family. We weren't really even in touch, and I had to go to the house for something, and I realized I knew the house. I knew every part of the house because I'd been teleporting there for so long when I was a child. But interestingly, it was mirrored. Like, it was the exact, like, where I saw things were like a mirror image of the way the layout was. But so that's the difference. And yeah, I just wanted to kind of geek out on teleporting. And then we'll get a lot more time to talk about that later. But the cravings, the feelings that they're getting, and Jonas is able to explain that a little bit to them, and how much we need that, you know? Like, when we're starting to open up to being more than a me, we have to start getting
on that level, right?
Yeah, and getting a little more fluid about how we're...
And it's nice to be exposed to these concepts from somebody who's had these experiences, right? Versus trying to do it in the dark, because sometimes you don't know.
Exactly, and I think that's what's... So here we've got the little bit of a... We're only episode 2 in this, and, you know, we know how edgy it is that it's been for them to wake up to this, but we've got... Not everybody's got Jonas in there yet to help them, but they're getting some nuggets of how to deal with this at this point, which is really cool. Yeah. So that's all I got for this episode that I can think of. Do you got anything?
Yeah, just that we didn't touch on Leto a whole lot, or Kala too much. I know there's so much to talk about, right? But as far as I am also we, and I really think with Nomi, it's the transgender process that people can relate to. Right, in Pride. And with Leto, it's being a homosexual, right? And his partner wants to be with him out in the public and, you know, express their love, and he can't, and he gets upset in that scene. And with Kala, she's got this ancient tradition of, she wasn't betrothed, but they have certain, society works a certain way for her. I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert, but I know things work a certain way. And she's got her peers, like all of the girls at work, love this dude. He's the cream of the crop, and she doesn't love him. And she's really tore up about this. So there's a lot of this not trusting yourself and your ability to make those judgments based in fear if you don't trust yourself and you're not true to who you are as an authentic person. So I just wanted to pop in there and just say that those guys had that journey in different ways throughout this episode of how do you do the right thing for yourself and try to please everybody else you're trying to please. We went over a lot of things today, and we didn't cover everything. So if there was something that you really loved about this episode that we didn't cover, or you thought we missed, or you have a question, or you want to make a comment, hit us up on Twitter. That's at live_sense8. You can find out more about our work at consciouslyawesome.com. You please give us, rate and review us on iTunes, because that helps people find us. And the more people that find us on there helps them know about Sense8 and the magic of it. You can also email us at team@livesense8.com. And if you love the show and you love Sense8, please support us on patreon.com/livesense8 as we continue to keep the message alive.
Thank you, everyone.
We'll see you next time.